All right. Assalamu alaikum. Good evening, everybody. My name is Noorulain, and I'm heading the Career Development Center at TMUC, Pakistan. And we are joined today with another episode of Hisaab. And like the name suggests, we are going to talk about a lot of हिसाब किताब जो कि हमें ज़िंदगी में करना पड़ता है एज प्रोफेशनल्स बहुत ज़्यादा करना पड़ता है एंड व्हाट वी हैव लर्नड रिसेंटली where we have to make do and make shift with all that is happening around us. We have made strategies that those strategies did not really work most of the time, and we have to go back to the drawing board and redo a lot of things. So today's topic, as G, can you hear me? Okay, good. So, our first topic today, when we're talking about strategies that fail, Umar, I'll come around to you. I know you're running your own practice. What happened when COVID hit? जो सारी strategies बनाई हुई थी ट्रांसफॉर्मेशन की फाइनेंशियल स्केलेबिलिटी की ग्रोथ की they all just went up in the air in a flash. Were we ready to embrace this as a global pandemic that hit us? And how badly did the failing of strategies actually hit us?
Thank you, Noor. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First of all, I think congratulations on choosing a very pertinent topic as usual. And it's a really good question. I think it's a no-brainer in that regard that COVID has been once in a lifetime event. I mean, the last such pandemic hit us in the 1920s, late 1920s, 1927 to 1929 to be precise, the Spanish flu. So anybody saying that they were expecting it or were ready would have to be somebody exceptional or having a mirror into the future to visualize that. However, you are right that the traditional strategies kind of went out of the window, and the speed of change and adoption, particularly the digital transformation, really took it up. Initially, when COVID hit, there was a kind of lethargy, perhaps also due to the cost of embracing the change and the inherent human reluctance to change, that let's wait and watch, it might be a temporary phenomena. But as the time passed and it became more and more evident that what we now refer to as the new normal is here to stay, people start taking notice and start investing, depending on obviously the countries and the size of businesses within these countries. So even if we are talking about developed economies, the multinational, the big corporates were investing and did invest a lot more in the transformation. Different businesses, depending on their size, did that to a different extent. But I think almost all the different stratas, depending on their business model, did somehow adjust to the new normal. With regard to the strategies, one thing that this taught us is the fundamental that the only constant in life is change. So you really have to be on your toes and be ready to adopt. And I think it's a classic case of also planning for exceptional circumstances. That is one major lesson that COVID has taught us.
Yeah, and rightly said that there were such exceptional circumstances, Umar, that we really saw, and everybody faced it. People who were working in the professional sphere, who were working on jobs, they faced it. People who were actually also working on, their small startups and business and daily wages. We saw everybody struggle. Faizan, that comes me to your point. You're working for a large corporate organization, TPS. It's very renowned as well. What happened when people started? People who were employees, the most important stakeholder that a company has, an organization has. How was the feeling? How was the general sentiment when a strategy they could see that it's going down the drain?
Well, yes, thank you, Noor, for choosing, as rightly said by Omar Saab, that it's a. I think the new normal includes the discussion of this topic all the time. So I think how we saw in the TPS the whole COVID episode, especially the earlier days in Feb and March, it was such that being a technology company, we were already running pilots because of pilots of a working from home model across several segments in the company, because we were looking at the global arena and taking inspirations from the likes of Microsoft and Google, and they were quickly adopting to the developments unfolding from January 2020. So by the time the government announced the lockdown, our half of the company was already working from home. So when it comes to the response of the management level, or as a company strategy, I think we were slightly earlier. We were awake a bit earlier in responding to the one in a thousand times, once in a thousand years kind of a situation. But yes, when it comes to the employee side, or the uh, the area of uncertainty with respect to the employment, I think it was again unprecedented. And um, since I lead two teams, one of the contracts and the other is of credit control. So our priority actually, all of the priorities, were just swept to the right, and the cash and collecting the cash became the first most priority. So I think the uncertainty was unprecedented, and it revolved around all the aspects of employment. Uh, Fortunately, our company did not give in to any of the pressures of that time, and we
Hmm.
also did very well. But looking at the industries, yes, it was very bad.
Yeah, so that brings me to the narrative that I wanted to actually build. So the first thing that, irrespective of the fact that, we're looking at different sectors, we're looking at different business groups, we're looking at different scales of organization. One thing that goes for certain is that uncertainty of any kind, any lack of risk mitigation, any lack of, getting the first mover advantage, making sure that you're resilient enough to change. I think that should be the first strategy that, organizations need to adopt in order to make sure that, their strategies are working. But Umar, let me come around to you. You run your own practice, which is synonymous to, if we look at any business entrepreneur, if we look at any SME sector, if we look at any MSME, what happens there? On paper we see perfect business plans. On financials we see very nicely made financials, and because I work with a lot of startups, I know that startups have, a lot of groundwork that they have done. Yet when it comes to profitability, when we tell them, all right, how many sales, how many customers, how much growth, they say, oh, that strategy didn't really work. So what happened with the startup? What are the possible things that these startups have done which have actually not let them reach to that level?
That's another good question, or a really good one. I remember in our last session, I also represent Pakistan on Global Tech Forum. So in our last session, we actually were having a discussion in the context of global collaborations with regard to the technology sector. And your very question was one of the items on the agenda, and representatives from 38 different countries were actually sharing their insights. So it's a really good question. Look, Noor, it's such a detailed subject that no amount of time is enough to actually cover it, but I'll try to make a few core points. The first thing is, what exactly are you coming up with? Have you really identified an area, a need that your product or service is going to actually address? The second thing is whether your product or service is a new one or existing one, because that would change the whole dimension. If you are going with a different version or a better version of an existing product or service, then you have to decide on the strategy in terms of differentiation or cost leadership or a combination. However, if you are coming up with a new solution, something that you are the first mover, you have created. So, for example, if we talk about social media, the pioneers in the social media or communication industries, etc., they that's altogether a different ball game. Then you can actually exercise some leverage in terms of how you want to place yourself. So that would be the first important thing where you are starting from. The second thing, which I believe is extremely, extremely important for any business and more so the startup, is the combination, the mental understanding, and the thought process of the pioneering team. So, the people who have actually come together, how much they gel with each other, what are their philosophies, do they really complement each other, do they really sit well with each other or not? And once you have these things in process, then you actually can look at your strategic and tactical objectives, also taking the rest of the team on board and actually translating those objectives into achievable smaller bit points and targets that you can go ahead with. And even after doing all that, you have to be mentally prepared for to be able to actually really bounce back from any unforeseen setback and be able to account for events which are unforeseen, or even events which you are predicting within your plan or strategy. So for example, if I borrow your example, you were talking about sales target, etc., just to make things simple. So you might have a sales target which you believe is very attainable, but your market research or even the factors that suddenly change in the market might make it more ambitious. So your plan actually need to be ready to account for these factors and what you would be doing in the event of such an eventuality. So these are some of the core factors that I would be looking at if I was to start a startup or invest in one.
Hmm. Loved it. I think one of the things that I really picked up, and I think all of the people who are joining us, especially the startups who are in the tech space as well, is something that you picked up, that having a mix of people, who are complementing each other, which does not necessarily mean that all the software engineers set up like a startup that is tech enabled. I think a mix of somebody who can do your business development for you, somebody who could do your marketing, somebody who could come in with a technical expertise, and that technical expertise is also split up. And I think what another thing that I picked up, Omar, which I'm going to connect with what I'm going to ask Faizan, is that in startups, it's really easy that we set small targets which are achievable, लो हैंगिंग फ्रूट जल्दी से लें उसको और आगे बढ़ें. ठीक है, उसको फेल भी करना है तो फेल फास्ट करें, right? So that you can come up with a new solution. But Faizan, what happens when we're talking about a big, huge company? Are the big companies also looking at setting like small targets? Are they okay with setting small targets, or is it just about that? Okay, let us have a 3 year, 5 year strategy. We're gonna strive towards that, and then any hurdles that come in the way, we should be able to dodge our way and get to that particular goal.
Well, yes, very interesting parallel you would try to draw. I think Well, yes, it is not easy to be as flexible and agile for a longer, for a larger organization, like in a startup. But I think it was already in the pre-COVID decade in the 21st century that people realized that the flexibility and the speed are the two things which are necessary for even more so necessary for the large organizations, because um, everybody when it starts looks forward to scaling its business, but the catch is in keeping your flexibility and speed intact, which actually gets compromised because of the involvement and addition of people in terms of teams and addition of locations, teams, and logistical challenges. So I think it is inherent in every business that they maintain and they keep up with the requirement of the pace and agility and flexibility. But for the organizations which have a huge number of people working for them, complex reporting structures, and people who have settled into doing things in a certain way. Like we are a company of about 500 people in a technology space, and who are into this particular domain of digital cards and payment solutions. So I think we were, probably walking in front of the march when the COVID hit us, because the whole world started going digital, and we were just there. So we were kind of a, one may say that we were in the right time, in the right place at the right time, but uh, on the flip side is that we have been posed with a greater challenge to live up. So I think uh, in larger organizations, obviously it largely depends on the leadership, how quick they are to read and sniff the challenge lying ahead. And I also think that risk management uh, in this region, particularly in Pakistan, I think it's not seen as something which is given due attention and time. Um, unlike usually seen in the market, I think my organization really has always placed a great emphasis on risk management, and we have a dedicated team which works for risks of all kinds, which actually looks after risks of all time of all types. So I think if risk management done is properly and it is integrated in all the functions of a large organizations in modern ways and not some traditional ways where we have a risk department um, trying to poke its nose in everyone's business. I think if that approach is avoided and risk management is integrated into the culture, I think there can be some capacity building made possible in every function of even a large organization to be able to look a bit farther than just the upcoming quarter target or the biannual target or annual target. So I think that's the way of doing it.
Faizan and Umar, can you still hear me?
You're back, yes.
Hello. Okay,
Yes.
you can. All right. So, very interesting perspective, Fazan, and I'm going to pick up in which you said that, what risk management strategies. I'm going to put a little fun spin around to this. And, one of the things that we hear a lot from people is कि यार ये पुराने लोग जो बैठे हुए ना 10-10 साल के एक्सपीरियंस वाले इनको तो पहले आप फारिग करें ठीक है ये हमारी ऑर्गेनाइजेशन की ग्रोथ नहीं होने दे रहे इनकी वजह से हमारी कोई टेक्नोलॉजी इंटरवेंशन नहीं हो रही इनकी वजह से हमें जो है वी आर स्ट्रगलिंग टू एक्चुअली make something exciting come out is that true Umar?
Uh, as a professional, we are always taught never to say absolutely not. But if I was to choose one instance, that would be probably this. I don't think it has to do with anything to do with experience or age. It's more to do with the individuals. So I've seen people who are in their 60s, but they are so excited and open to ideas. And I fear also unfortunately met some youngsters who are just starting out their careers, and they are in such a comfortable safety net, they don't want anything out of the normal. So I think the underlying premise is a bit, if we can say, faulty. So it's more about the individual rather than the experience. I believe experience, if anything, is a blessing in disguise, because if the person has the right mindset, it actually puts them in a position to take a sensible, calculated decision in terms of the risk, investment, everything, and plus having the right exposure, whether the particular solution would be a good fit. Let me share this example with you. So, in our firm, MLCC, um, we are mashallah one of the top name in the taxation practice, and you are aware that we were the pioneer ACC and legal practicing firm in the entire region too. And our managing director is in is close to 70, and whenever we get any idea, any pitch about some innovation, even let me just give you a real life example. When this COVID thing started, even about a year before that, we already started shifting on distance working and digital working. I didn't share that before because it wasn't relevant, and that's one of the reason when COVID hit, we were perhaps one of the few firms in Pakistan which were least impacted, if anything. I'm sharing that on your program. Alhamdulillah, we actually registered material growths during COVID. That's one of the reason that we were previously prepared. And this entire idea was the brainchild of the managing director, and he actually convinced everyone more than a year before anybody anticipated COVID, and that too in a country like Pakistan, and that too in a field like service industry, and that too in the taxation and corporate service where individual interaction is highly valued. And we created a system where we were providing both options, and when COVID came, that really came handy. So coming back to your question, Noor, that's a prime real life example I've shared with you. It has nothing to do with the age, nothing to do with the experience, more to do with the a kind of individual you are dealing with and the kind of mindset they have.
You to say this. Why? Because I thought that this would put us in the right frame of mind where we're talking that there's a lot of talk. बहुत ज़्यादा लोग इस तरह की बातें करते हैं कि यार ये नए लोग लेके आए. There is no accountability and there is no actually differential to experience. Somebody who's gone through a practice of doing things right knows that what needs to be done. And what Faizan was also speaking about, that the risk element, the fact that we need to mitigate risk now more than ever, is because every day is changing. However, I think what I have felt is that why some companies fail to evolve or why their strategies do not work in the long run is where there is a lack of succession planning, where there's a lack in which new talent is unable to come up to that mark, create that conducive culture in which the youngsters would also thrive, and there's more innovation coming. Unfortunately, maybe this might be true for our country, but there are other countries also that go through, other corporations also that go through this, that ideas and voicing those ideas is not really encouraged. And what I believe that does is that there's a certain lack of innovation that then takes the hit, right? Because there are not many people who are actually as part of their succession planning. Vezan, how important do you think then is us giving back to society? I think what we three are doing right now on a working day after office hours is via the CxO Global Forum, is that we are giving back to society. We're having conversations. We are creating awareness. We are creating
I'm sorry, Noor. I think we have lost your voice. Um, is it just me, am I right? Or I think I've lost I've lost it. I couldn't hear the question.
Yeah, you're right, Fazan bhai. We just lost her.
Thank you. You mute. Yeah. No. Okay. Succession planning. I think I heard till that part. Yes. Um, well, I think supplementing the views shared by Umar Saab, that it's not in the age; age is just a number, particularly with this issue. I think when it comes to checking on the senior employees or family members of an organization, I think it is more about the trust created by the culture of the company with the people. If it is not a trust based culture, it does not matter what age you are. Uh, there will always be, the triggers of uncertainty which will tick people off, and they would resist any change, be it a cultural or technological or any other change. People will resist with their might. So I think the culture is the first most thing, first and foremost, with respect to the trust. And then I think when it comes to succession planning, I think it's rather on the other side of the question. um, Succession planning is important, but I think it's a bit overrated most of the times. It's practically not as much possible. I might not be liked while quoting it, but I've seen that perhaps we can redefine the scope of the succession planning when we speak of it. um, it means that the criticality of any job, any position, or any role must not be left on the whim of any one individual. I think that could be, a starting point for discussing succession planning. When succession planning is discussed, most of the times it somehow gets inferred that there should be multiple people for every role, sitting on bench or ready for to take over in case a guy or senior person leaves in the middle of any project or a strategic move or something. It's not practically possible because people are indispensable in the short term and not so in the long term. So a short term is when certain variable factors are not variable as such; they are fixed. And I think for a company like ours, where we do around 100 projects every year, technology projects, I think there are certain projects where we really look up to keeping the people in the project and not lose them, because those changes are detrimental. And I think I would just extend this view to cover the entrepreneurship side or the startup side. Sometimes it's not easy. Most of the times in the startups, I think people are indispensable in the earlier phases, and um, they might not even start thinking about succession planning until a certain time, or a certain stage their business reaches. I think succession planning, I would just sum it up. I think succession planning is important, but more or so, we must look at those hyper successful companies, which we usually look up to, like in US. Those companies have a history of keeping people with them for 30 years, 40 years, and it's very normal there. Perhaps the people who reach to the top most of the times have all worked for more than 2 decades in a company, like AIG Insurance in US, or Google or Apple. We know these big names. People work here for many years, and that's something which actually keeps the knowledge asset within the company and help it grow faster. So succession planning is good, but it should not be overrated and it should not be overemphasized. That's what I think.
Okay, Noor, I've read your question. So, going on the same question, I think Faizan Sab has already covered most of the point, and I agree with most of what he has said. I'll just add few more things. Number one, definitely, it's more about the system processes, procedures, and the keyword here is the culture. So just like he was rightly mentioning, I remember we used to read about Japanese companies where there was this culture that people used to work in one company for their entire life, and that was their entire careers. That has changed even in Japan. If we talk about our part of the world and even developed economies, US and UK, we have started seeing a trend, except for some senior level positions, more junior, medium, even medium to senior level, you'll see in between 1 to 2 years, normally the quality resource does move. So that definitely in that particular area places an important on the system procedures, processes, them to be well documented, proper training, etc. So you can have the new resource coming in, more so especially where the processes or the product or service is human resource oriented. Now, coming on to senior levels, Faizan Sab has very rightly pointed out that there are a lot of benefits, and usually the trend there is if the culture is right, if the career path is proper, if everything is properly taken care of, people tend to stay in senior positions. So the equilibrium of the equation changes for which part of the organization you are speaking about. That's one thing. The second thing, in terms of the startups, I totally agree with Faizan Sab that they are normally in the stage where they are more looking towards actually creating something, and succession is not really on their card. However, I would like to point out that in many of the startups, even in the initial phase, or even in the first initial seed financing phase, we do see that new people are brought in, or even at times some of the existing team is replaced for the business to grow. So after a little while, it does become an important part of the process there too. Rest of the process, he has rightly pointed out the culture, the human resource, procedures, system, processes. I think we have to develop an organizational strategy, whether we are talking about a multinational or a startup or a medium level organization, define the key positions, clarify the performance metrics, evaluate the bench strength, and build a succession management pool along with professional development, and then a strong HR function. If all these things are happening with a positive culture, the turnout rate should drop. But even if something happened due to any unforeseen circumstances, the organization would be in a better place to address that. So, Noor, you can maybe try the sign language for today. These are some of the technological challenges that we have faced post COVID. Sure. Okay, so Noor has asked parting comments. Faizan bhai, you first. You need to unmute, Faizan sir.
uh, the importance of system and the changing times. And I think to sum it up from where we started, I would I would insist on placing emphasis on uh, the need and importance of the uh, the culture and the changing values over the period of time we have seen during these 2 years. I think many of the people have realized, as you would also have noticed, that there is a talk of the great resignation in this recently in the global employment industry. People are resigning not only from their jobs but also from their old ways of doing things. And People want to have a new balance of life. People want to have to see this work from home culture as part of of an overall package of working career. So I think values have changed to a certain extent, and culture is also changing. I think adaptability, more accommodation, diversity, and tolerance for appetite for change, I guess, increasing the appetite for change would probably, all these factors combined would probably become the detrimental factors for success, for the success of any company or organization, irrespective of their size in the modern age. So I think that's all from my side. Musa.
Thank you, Faizan. So, I'll try not to repeat any of the point we have already made. So yeah, definitely the culture has changed, and the new normal would definitely involve more flexibility for different working classes, and certainly a change in the way we interact. And obviously, this will definitely culminate in a change of culture. I think a couple of important point to make is the lack of buy by the team in any strategy. So when we are setting up the strategy, whether we are taking the team on board, and once the strategy has been set and we are talking about implementation, how effectively not only did we communicate, but won over the people who are actually to implement. And by that, I don't just mean the management team, but actually the entire team, the staff as well, that has to be involved in that. So a lack of alignment there would definitely lead to a loss of momentum, and obviously if the objectives are unclear, the strategy would be bound to fail. That, I think, is a basic thing that we all would agree on. Lastly, we have spoken about accounting for exceptional circumstances. I think failure to account for business as usual at times, properly actually incorporating that in plans, is one of the major reasons why many strategies fail. And last but not the least, but very important and close to my heart, failure to properly celebrate success and give credit where it's due is one of the major reasons why not only the strategies fail, but we lose precious human resource too. So that's it from me. Thank you very much for everyone,
Thank
to
you
everyone
so
who joined, and
much.
to you,
Thank you
Noor.
so much, gentlemen. I don't know if you can hear me, but thank you so much for this fantastic discussion. The internet gave up on me on a couple of times during this session, but we hope that this episode of
And we were so happy to hear your voice, and the internet played its trick. So I'll just do the honors. And on behalf of Noor and CxO Global, thank you to everyone who has attended. And obviously, I have to thank myself and Faizan Sab as well for
Thank
joining.
you,
It was
Musa.
really a
I would thank
pleasure.
you. I would thank you.
Thank you.